And welcome, fellow Wasteland survivors. I'm Dean, aka Nasty Bones, and thanks for joining me today at Abernathy Farms, where we're building the Starship Enterprise from Star Trek. But over the last couple of videos, we've taken a break from that, and we've been working on our main structure around the farmhouse. Now, today's video hopefully will finish this up. Also in this video, what I'd like to do is continue the building a little farther to the left and add in some stores and some more sleeping quarters. I'm a little bit light on sleeping quarters and I need a few more rooms. Now today's video is chocked full of tips to help us build scrappy dwellings and stores. Sometimes when you're building like this, objects just don't want to snap in or go where you'd like them to. And hopefully with these tips, we can fix that. Okay, our first tip is all about this door frame. Now it's really the only door frame that we've got in the vanilla section. In the warehouse and barn section we do have some door frames, but of course those are much taller than our vanilla walls, so they won't work. Also, the door is thick. It's thick like a concrete wall. It's even thicker at the top. And because of that, if we did snap it in correctly, it'd be really hard to get a full floor in. And we'd have a kind of a gap there. So, this is my tip to do it. We take a concrete pillar. I've got an electrical conduit, and I've group selected them all together. Bring it over into the build and line it up. You can even sink the door frame into the floor. There is very little collision area there. Now, do keep this in mind. The only way you can do this is if you can sink the pillar into the ground. On the main structure of the Abernathy farmhouse, there are two roofs that stick out, really unneedlessly far. And they're really hurting me in trying to close off the second story and third story of this build. It's making these objects really hard to blend in with it. So what I've done is I've group selected a shack wall, the half ones, brought it over, placed it in, and now it kind of covers that gap up a little bit. Also, if I take a half a wall, use a metal post because the concrete pillar is a little too thick to fit in there. And I can group select it, bring it in, and fill that gap up nicely. And yeah, that looks pretty good. Now we're just going to have to deal with it on the inside. Now the next thing I'd like to show is sometimes when you're blending these different vanilla walls in with each other, you're going to get these little gaps. What they're from is it's supposed to be where a floor and a roof goes in. But it's pretty easy to fix these. I'm just going to go inside and by hand place a couple of walls down. They set right on top of the roof below us nicely, and I had no issues lining them up. Plus, if you look around inside the main dwelling of the farmhouse, you'll randomly see those kind of walls just placed in here and there. Okay, now that I've got most of the structure built, it's time to add in the back wall. Now, there's a little kind of trick to this because if you notice the back wall of the farmhouse, the walls are actually in reverse. So we need to put these walls in reverse just like they are to match up. And it's real quick and easy to put them together. I'm going to put all the walls together at one time because we're going to group select them and place them all in at one time. I think it would be too hard to try to snap them in. Plus, with the whole full wall, it'll be easier to line them up. Now I'm taking the build or the wall over to the main structure and trying to line it up the best I can so it's not crooked. Now we'll bring it over to the end, and I'll just keep fidgeting with it until I get it in there. Now, keep this in mind. The wall is flipped around. So, the outsides are inside and the insides are outside. So we're going to have a little bit of problem trying to blend floors into that. Plus, we do have these gaps, just like we had on the other side, but we'll use the half of walls to fill them in. Now, once again, because we are sticking inward with our walls, it's going to make it impossible to snap these next walls on. So, I think I got another pretty good little tip that we can do this. Let's take out these walls that are hindering us, and we'll put our regular walls back in because they are snapped and all together nicely. This other wall is blended in, so it's easier to re-blend that wall in than it is our main wall. Now, this time I'll just grab two pieces, I'll flip them around the correct way, line them up, bring them over, and just adjust it until I can get it to turn green. Now, this isn't going to be perfect, but that's okay. That's the beauty of a junk building. That, pieces just aren't fitting in properly and square. And, even though they stick out a little bit, it's not really all that bad. And the whole wall blends up super nice. I wish we had some more of those string lights. I could add those over here. It would definitely look exactly like the main building. Okay, the next tip that we're going to see is something I use all the time, but for some reason I've never gotten a video out on it. It's extremely simple. We're up on the top floor and I need to make some steps that will blend up to the top of the main structure. So I've got a quarter floorboard out and I'm lining it up on the floor the best I can. Now, if you take these scrappy steps, they'll snap onto it down in the floor. Then if you click on the steps, they pop up out of the floor, and you're completely, perfectly lined up. And now all we got to do is adjust our floors to get it as close to the metal railing as possible. And I'll use this half a concrete wall and pillar to do that. And yeah, I think we're pretty close. That ought to be good enough. And the step snaps right on there. Now, I don't want the steps to be 3 wide there, just 2. So we'll use this Junky shack wall and place it in there to help fill up some of the gap. If you use those Junky walls in the center, they look really nice and add an extra effect to the detail. Okay, now that we've got our first steps made, we actually need to step up one more time. So we're just going to repeat that same process. I'll lay down a floor because we're all square and straight. Then I'll put 3 of these quarter floors at the end. The reason I'm doing that is to keep this floor from snapping while I'm trying to line it up. And I'll line it up the best I can once again. And I think that's got it. Just a little bit more there. Now I can go ahead and add in an extra piece. Take our other pieces out, and I'm just moving them so that way that the steps and stuff will not snap when I try to bring them up out of the floor. And I cannot believe that is absolutely perfect. Sets flush down on the metal railing and goes flush up into the pre-existing ceiling. This has worked out perfectly. Okay, my next tip takes us back to those pesky damn door frames. Let's say you snapped one in and you just want to do it that way. Well, you can still fill that gap up. Now, you can't snap a regular vanilla floor in, but you can go get a barn or a warehouse floor and they will snap in there. This works really good to fill in that extra gap. The barn floor snaps over top of the vanilla floors. That's the only real way you can get it in there. But I don't like it because it has a different floor to it, and I don't want to see that. So let's go ahead and do our first trick up here, and we'll do it by using these concrete floors that you find in the barn or warehouse section. We can actually sink a concrete pillar down into them. And because of that, we're going to be able to put the door frame in just like we did down below in the beginning of this video. Also, I've got a concrete floor over here by where the door jamb is, so that way I can sink the door frame down, or the concrete pillar down into it to place our door frame where we want. And this allows us, once again, to get the door frame in and a full floor. Okay, let's turn our attention over to this corner where these two crappy ceilings are sticking out. They're really giving us hell trying to fit anything in right there. I was only able to snap a half a barn floor in right there where you can see, and we cannot get another piece to snap in, vanilla or barn. So we're going to need to move the floor out a little bit. And this is basically as easy as it is to do that. We're going to take two half a concrete walls. We're going to put one on top of the other. If we take a concrete pillar, snap it to the bottom, it lines up right in the center of the concrete wall. Now we can bring the wall down, and as you can see, we've moved the wall just a slight increment. Now we can go ahead and snap a floor to that. I'll move the barn floor up to match it. I'll also move this barn concrete floor up to match that so that we have two markers. Now I'll move the barn floor back to the original position, and we'll snap our shack wall on. The reason we want to do that is because we want the shack wall to go back where it was originally at. Now I'll move the barn floor up and snap it to the concrete barn floor, and now we should be able to snap another quarter floor to that, but not the vanilla. The vanilla one wouldn't go in there. It's matching up with the shacky wall there, and that's why it wouldn't snap in. But the barn floor did. And now everything's all lined up, and yeah, no gaps. Okay, I think what we need to do now is just add in a couple of these half a walls. I think I'm also going to add in a half a wall in the front where we just added that floor in. And we're probably just going to have to create and make our own walls in this little corner section. And we'll do it by, using these half walls. Maybe have to use some of the Junky railings. Just kind of fill that little corner up. Okay, now that I've got that all kind of squared in, it's time to put some ceilings in. And I want to kind of stick with the original theme and use these Junky ceilings. Now I'm going to snap one in right here, but I'm going to snap one in that's missing like a corner. Then if I get back into the roof section again, there is another roof that has a corner missing, but it's on the opposite side. So I'll just scroll through and find that, and that should snap right in there. And it does. This is a great way to blend roofs together. And here's another example. A little later in the build, I've got most of the rooms done and I'm adding the ceilings in, but oh no, I've got that little gap right there. And, I want a ceiling in there. So let's see if we can get one to snap. Now, realistically, most every ceiling would snap in there. But I decided to go with the flat roofed one. Okay, we got one more thing to build up here, but we actually have to go to the ground to build this. What I'm doing here is I'm just showing how I'm blending the different barn and vanilla objects together to help create some different types of looks. Maybe to close off some gaps or, whatever. But keep in mind that you can really blend a lot of these objects together if, you use your imagination a little bit. What I'm building here is our bar. This is where, all the settlers are going to come after a long, hard day of work and get a nice cold drink. But I want it to go up on the top of the main structure of the Abernathy farmhouse. And I want it to match up and blend up with the pre-existing walls that are up there. So now that I've got it built, it's time to see if we can get it in. Now, I didn't show how I prepped this, but really all I did was I added in 3 or 4 of the concrete barn floors just a little bit lower than the main floor. It doesn't really matter how high or low that is, as long as you can sink a concrete pillar into it. Now I'm just going to use this corner edge of the build to try to line my part of the build up with it. Now I'm really struggling here because I can't see anything. And I can't see if my pillar is turning green or not. But then I notice a spot that I can see the pillar. And I'll mark it with an arrow. Now that I can see the pillar and that it's red, I know that I'm not in a good spot. And I can just keep fidgeting around and adjusting this until I finally find it. And I'm just going to take a chance, go ahead and drop it, and we'll see how close we are to matching up. I did save just before I did this, so we could go back to a previous save if it's not matching up. And oh my God, it's looking perfect. Absolutely perfect. Yeah, I never dreamed in my wildest dreams that it would blend up and in as good as it just did. That looks excellent. And since a lot of my settlers like hanging out up here quite a bit, I figured this would be a good spot for, the bar. Okay, time for our next tip. Since I like using a lot of these junky fences, they come in handy for all kinds of things. The tip I wanted to show is how easy it is to align these up. You can stick them in a prefab or something you've built and make some walls. If you adjust those posts a little bit, you can keep snapping the grate in until you get it nice and straight. Now this is my gun vendor station, and what my idea is I want to make some junky gun displays. And I want to use this graded fence to do it. So I've made another fence section outside, group selected it and brought it in. Now I'm just aligning it up to the bottom posts as close as I can. Once I get it in, then lift it up to the ceiling, and that should give us a very nice looking screen wall. And yeah, that really looks good. Now we should be able to put our gun display cases or racks, whatever they're called, on them, and it should look really good. Now that this part of the build's complete, or almost complete, it's time to add in some electric. Also, I'm thinking some signage. And I've got a pretty good idea on some neon signage, but it's going to take quite a bit of resources to do it. And I'm getting really close to the end of our build size. At this point in time, we're already at 2.5 times the normal build size here at Abernathy Farms. Okay, over the next few segments, I will be explaining a little bit about what's going on. But I do have an entire electrical video series that explains almost everything that we're about ready to see today. So let's go ahead and get started. First of all, we're going to be using some interval switches, and we need to have them away from the lighting that we're going to be lighting up. So I'm using these electrical conduit pieces to pipe the power over to where the sign is going to be. I'm moving these pipes around so that way I can place 6 lines in. We're going to need a total of 6 different power sources going over to the sign. And I'll just continue to keep moving them around until I can get all of them in. Now that I've got them all in, it's time to put some electrical conduits up. And I'll need 6 of these as well. Now you don't have to line them up. I'm just kind of vain, and so I am. But these will never really be seen, so it doesn't really matter how you place them in back here. Now we'll hook them all up to our electrical conduits, and now we're ready to go program our poles. Okay, our sign today is going to require 2 different kinds of animations. The first one's going to be a continuous animation. It'll require 2 interval switches and 1 delayed on switch. Everything will be programmed at 1 second. Our second animation will be a recycling animation, and it'll require 1 interval switch and 3 delayed on switches. The interval switch will be programmed at 3 seconds on, 1 second off. The 3 delayed on switches will need to be programmed individually because the times are different. The first delayed on switch will be 1/4 second. The second one will be at 1/2 second. The third one will be at 1 second. Next, we'll add in 3 delayed off switches, and they'll be programmed individually as well. The first 2 will be programmed at 1/8 of a second before they go off. The third and final delayed off switch will be programmed at 1/2 of a second before it goes off. Now I'll connect all of our switches up accordingly, but do not connect it to your power lines yet. Bring out your generator or pure power, connect it to one of your conduit lines, and go ahead and start laying out your lettering or your lighting. We have now created a dominant field, and we'll go ahead and put the according lights in for that particular field. Once I've got those in, I'll go put the electric to another line and place in more lettering. Now I'll move the electric to another line, and we'll start putting our main sign in. And now we can see why we have the wall up there. That was so I could snap these neon letters to it, because they won't snap to the fence. Now our animation is going to be the U and the E. And what I've done is switched our fields again and added another U and an E. Switch the fields again, another U, another E. And I'll do it one more time. There'll be a total of 4 U's and 4 E's up on this sign. The reason is each one of those fields will be activated individually to make the light, or those the U and the E, do something specific, and we're going to get to see if it's going to work here in a second. I have size glitched this settlement pretty good 2.5 times already, and this may not work. Sometimes it can't process the information quick enough for these kinds of animations to work properly. Okay, at this point in time, it seems to be working great. Excellent. Now, Gun Shop is our first animation, and once again, I do have videos out in my electrical series that explains how I do this. Our second animation is the U and the E, and yeah, it really looks like that's shorting out, losing an electrical connection. Okay, one more quick tip before we take a look and see what we've done so far today, and that's how to move these pictures and signs around. if you'll place your little sign or picture, it works with quite a few of the wall mounted objects, place it on a static item or an item that can't be scrapped, a tree, a building, so on. You can actually group select it with a pillar or other objects like the electrical conduits or the metal posts, whatever, and you can actually move them around and place them anywhere that you want. And I'm going to use this tip quite a bit in the decorating of this particular build. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I think that's about it for today's video. Thanks for coming and hanging out with me. I appreciate it. Hopefully it was very informative, that we learned a few new ways to, manipulate these junk objects around while we're building these junky structures. Okay, everybody, once again, thank you very much for coming and sharing your precious time with me. And just like always, until next time, please stay safe and peace.